A brand can create as much content as they want to, but a consumer is the one that says, I want this piece, and I want this piece, and I want this piece. And brands need to understand that. They need to understand that the consumer owns the conversation. They're going to continue to own it, and they'll always own it from here in.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Mark McCarthy, who's the technical director from Guerrilla. Mark, it's great to have you, and wanted to tell you, you have the distinction of being the very first person that we're interviewing from Australia.
Well, I feel very honored. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great. Great that you're here. Wanted to dive right in and tell us a little bit about Guerrilla, sort of in a few sentences, what you see as your major competitive differentiator in the marketplace.
Guerrilla is a customer experience agency. We're born digital. We've always been digital. But at the same time, we're full service. So we'll do brand and strategy all the way through to the actual technical implementation at the other end. That's somewhat of a commodity these days. There's a lot of agencies out there doing the same thing. I think what differentiates us is that we're genuinely about the experience, and we're wildly passionate about it as well. So any conversation that we have with a client, they might come to us and say, oh, we need a website, or we need a CRM, or this or that. And we'll say, you probably do need that. How much of it, we're not too sure yet. So let's just pause and take a step back. Let's have a conversation around what are you doing strategically? Where do you need to move the needle? And then up front is where we add a lot of value to the strategy that drives a business, and then what then comes on the back of that from an implementation point of view. Because we might build a website, we might build in some CRM, we might connect the whole piece together. Well, the client might have a bunch of tech that they've already got, but they're misusing. And there's overlaps, and with that, we'll unpack that and demystify and make sure that the right pieces are there to deliver against the strategy. So I often find businesses just don't have that strategy yet. So we go in and help them do that.
Yeah, you actually penned an interesting article along those lines where you actually warned about beginning client engagements with a discussion around technologies, that it leads to a whole slew of issues and problems down the road. I wondered if you could maybe double click on that a little bit.
Yeah, so as a technical director, it's weird. I'll go into these conversations. I'm the first guy to say, let's not talk about technology. Kind of seems like I'm in the wrong job type, right? That my title's wrong, but it's not, because we need to come back. We need to make sure that experience comes first, because the experience might not need technology. The experience might need a better call center script. The experience might need something else to be able to engage with a customer in a more meaningful and human way. So if a business focuses on the technology, it's a selfish thing. So me in my BI team, I needed this. And as a CEO, I need to see these results. And as a marketer and a marketing department, I've got these set of KPIs that I need. So I'm going to put a system in that does that. I put a system in that does that. I'm going to put a system in that does this. And more often than not, they won't talk to each other. So now we've got different systems that have information about people, and it's disparate. It's not connected. So the conversation that's happening over here in marketing is different to that that's happening in a call center. And they can't see this. So if we focus on the tech, we've failed, because we could be putting in anything at that point, right? So that MarTech landscape and the ad tech landscape, just in the last sort of 5 years, we've gone from a few hundred to a few thousand. There's always going to be another piece of technology that comes through that's shinier. It's going to do something a little bit better than the next thing. But those pieces of technology have to be put in place to deliver an experience and a strategic outcome. If we don't focus on those things first, then we're always going to feel like we're struggling, and we're never actually going to move forward.
So with more and more brands competing on the basis of providing a superior customer experience, in your work with clients, what have you found to be sort of the essentials, or any key themes that you would sort of advocate for as part of an essential, a groundbreaking, a remarkable customer experience?
I think a groundbreaking, remarkable customer experience, it comes down to just treat people like humans. Like it's not rocket science. If you had to have a conversation with someone about anything, how would that conversation play out? Like, where are people going to engage with you? And then making sure that the way in which you interact with them is treating them with decency and honesty, and that the brand has an amount of integrity behind them. So brands are going to have to fight for that now. There's got to be trust. The experience across all of the touch points, whether they be technical or other, needs to be congruous. So that voice that you have with them, the key pieces that need to be put in place is, I think a lot of businesses still have to do some get their house in order. Mm-hmm. They've got to clean up their data. They've got to normalize the data, and then make sure that the systems that they've got are actually talking to each other. So whether they natively talk or whether they put something like a CDP in place to connect those pieces and only move around the data that's meaningful to each of those particular platforms. I think having those foundations in place, that housekeeping done, only then can an organization truly move forward and start to deliver on an experience.
So you have a really fascinating background, having spent a lot of time, with actual print journalism, and now you're on the digital side of all of this. How have you seen the evolution of, the content discussion play out, given those, interesting but related experiences?
So in this day and age, with the amount of information that we've got, the consumers have got an overload. So that conversation around content, it sits squarely with the customer now. It doesn't sit with a brand anymore. A brand can create as much content as they want to, but a consumer is the one that says, I want this piece, and I want this piece, and I want this piece. And brands need to understand that. They need to understand that the consumer owns the conversation. They're going to continue to own it, and they'll always own it from here in.
You have some interesting views on personalization, and given that the customer sits at the heart of all discussions now, how do you see all these tools which facilitate personalization at scale assisting with all of this?
The tools help us make better decisions. It helps us make sure that the messaging we were putting in front of customers is contextually relevant. It's building on that brand trust. So if I come and start talking to you about V8 cars and you're not interested in V8 cars, then I've lost it, right? I could put your name in there, I could personalize, but at the end of the day, we need to be very careful not to step into that territory of dude, we should do. It's like you can just imagine a bunch of people in an ad agency sitting around, they're like, dude, we should totally do this, and dude, we should totally do that. I always come in with a why. Where's the strategic benefit? Where's the value exchange that's going to happen from an experience point of view? Because if there isn't a proper value and a real value exchange, and if we're not delivering against a mapped strategic outcome, then we are dude, we should do. And it's just cool stuff for the sake of doing cool stuff. I love cool stuff, right? I've got 3D printers at home. I do all sorts of cool things. We've got VR goggles in the office. But at the end of the day, they're just tools to deliver an experience. If we just do it for our own selfish needs, we're stuck in dude, we should do land.
You have an interesting background, as you mentioned. You experiment at home with 3D printing. You build your own furniture. You carve it up on your bike. Where do you go to for inspiration for some of these digital experiences that you're building on behalf of clients?
I go to the world around me for inspiration around experience. It's like, where are people having moments of fun? And what does that fun look like? And what's creating that sense of excitement and entertainment for people? So you go to a theme park, it's the adrenaline rush, it's the dopamine hits that you're getting. So how can we deliver those kinds of emotional responses through experience? And more often than not, it's building rapport with someone. So if you can start to build rapport in a human way, so we might be mirror to match or whatever psychological tricks we might be playing to do that, we want to try and do that from a CX point of view as well. So understanding what their emotional drivers are and then creating the digital part of that. So eliciting an emotion through visual or auditory, or even just the fact that you care enough to say, Mark, I know it's hot today and you're about to go to a theme park. So here's an ice cream, or it's going to rain, so pack an umbrella. To me, that is you having a proper conversation with me about stuff I actually care about.
Yeah, you have an interesting view on data and privacy and how brands can play in that space. given Cambridge Analytica and given GDPR and the seemingly endless stream of breaches that occur. You've talked about, sort of personal data, but you've drawn this distinction with contextual data. I wondered if you could expand a little bit on that and how that actually could be a far safer and perhaps equally effective way for brands to, begin to incorporate data and personalize based on that data.
Yeah, so with the rollout of GDPR, we haven't seen it fully hit Australia. It would be naive to think that stuff like that's not coming. We do have our own legislation changes around PII and reportable data breaches, and it's only going to make it harder for marketers to engage with consumers and use that information for meaningful marketing material. So often when we have a conversation around personalization, people immediately, and I guess they inherently go to stuff we know about people or stuff we know about someone. So we might know their gender, we might know their age, we might know when they first bought a ticket from us or first engaged or didn't engage. And we start to drive our conversation of personalization around those things. So it's their birthday coming up, so we'll send them a birthday message as just a really generic example. But if we start to look at environmental as just one of those things, time as another one, weaving those into the personalization conversation adds another value to being relevant and contextual to that general conversation you're already having. And I think one of the cool examples that I've seen recently sits with Virgin Holidays in the UK. So they did their pre-departure emails and they re-architected their entire CX, and they just delivered on that journey. They just delivered on pre-departure to start with. And 800 data points in the email, bringing things in, and that might be people data, that might be other data such as weather. And everyone knows the UK is usually dark and gloomy and cold, and Barbados is warmer. So the conversation around people who have expressed an interest in that kind of holiday would be, hey, it's cold, warm up in Barbados. And recently, the UK had a heat wave. It got above 25 degrees. Everyone in Australia had a bit of a chuckle about that. And we were still putting jumpers on kind of thing. And or we're thinking about going for a surf or whatnot. It's just normal weather. But they said, well, it's now colder in Barbados than it is in the UK. So let's send a communication out that says cool off in Barbados. So the same communication was going out. They just changed the warm up and the cool off part based on an environmental factor. I think organisations, if they can expand beyond we've got all this data that we own, to what's all this other data that's out there that's going to add value to someone. And we use that example when we were talking earlier around the rain. So knowing someone's going to come to a theme park on a particular day and it's going to rain. So hey, pack an umbrella. And here are the top 5, 10 things to do in the park if it is raining.
With the advent of things like voice, playing an increasingly important part in people's digital experiences, what advice do you have for brands to, in fact, brand themselves in a voice world, where a lot of the information is actually coming through third-party assistants like a Siri, like an Alexa? Any thoughts on that?
Chat and voice and AI are going to be some big things that we'll see have a big impact on our overall approach to marketing in the next few years. I think brands need to be very, very careful around heading into that territory if it's not going to deliver on the experience and the strategic side of things. So kind of careful on the dude we should do. Hey, we need a chatbot. Maybe. But what's the value proposition that chatbot's going to give to a human at the other end? What's the value proposition of voice to people at the other end? So it should only be done when it's going to be meaningful. It's going to add value to the experience. And if it's not, don't do it. But in terms of if it does fit with a business and we are going to deliver, I think that brand voice needs to be part of that whole experience. How you talk, what words you use, the phrasing, the jokes, the giggles. It's got to be human. It can't be, hey, what's the weather today? 22 degrees and sunny. Like if there's a fun tonality that sits inside of that brand essence, that needs to come through. it's got to be another person talking at the other end. Otherwise, we sit in the weird valley and everyone's kind of icky and weirded out by it. So if we can either stay fully robotic or go quite human and relatable. And I think the human and the relatable part will be the success.
Awesome. Mark, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciated having you on.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.